Okay. After I thought about it a little bit, and also I was talking to a friend of mine who watched my video on being deported in China or whatever, um, or can you get deported? Will you be deported? That video. Uh, and after talking with him, and he was like, "Yeah, you're basically right." And he said, okay, there have been a number of foreigners that have been executed since 2009. There have been a couple Filipinos, South African, Australian. I think a couple, maybe another guy from England or from Great Britain. But there have been a number. It's not just one or two for importing drugs. But at the same time, uh, apparently, he told me, and this guy has been here. He's got children. He's been here for a long, long time, and he's been living here as a family with his family for quite some time. And he's a foreigner. And he was saying, Rob, the fact is, I know a couple people who they weren't importing drugs. They were, and they had gotten caught with a little bit of marijuana in their system. They had been held in detention. There were a number of them it happened to, and they were held in detention for 5 days. Confined at a Chinese police station as kind of a punishment. They got a fine, and then they were actually not deported. They were even allowed to renew their visas later on. They were able to make applications and essentially continue on in their life in China, even despite that. And he pointed out an error in my or sort of uh, he wanted to give some clarification. He said you should clarify something in your last video. And that was this. You don't, if you have done something wrong, it's good. I mean, you get caught and they just know it's you and you can't bullshit, right? Um, in in China, it is much better to be conciliatory and to sort of admit and not make a big, don't try to say you didn't do it or you're going to make big problems or you'll hire lawyers or make an international scene or some shit like that. And also for local Chinese people, the same sort of maxim, the same standard applies. That if you really say, "Oh, I'll be good. I know I did it. I just want to be good now," and depending on which in whose clutches you find yourself. I mean, depending on where you, which political subdivision, which jurisdiction you find yourself, are you in? You it can be different based on that, but regardless, it is good to not try to just sort of come clean, as it were, and try to give reasons why you did it or do whatever. But the but as a basic, and that is true, if you push too hard back, you can get an opposite reaction from the Chinese system. And that, I mean, I've encountered that principle even going back to my days in college, at the University of Washington, where I take classes in Chinese history, right, as part of my requirements to get my bachelor's degree in Chinese. To get your BA in Chinese language and literature, in addition to taking a ton of pure Chinese language classes, you have to take courses in Chinese history, some Chinese literature courses. Even going back to then, this principle, I remember hearing it and encountering it, and I also studied for a short period of time in Shanghai, over 20 years ago, uh, 23, 24, and it doesn't matter. And one of the things we got to do was as a group of students, foreign students, we went to a Chinese jail and a Chinese court, and Um, and they talked to us about the Chinese legal system and all that. And I remember the same principle held true then. So you don't, if you've screwed up, you don't want to just don't. My advice is just be very good. Be a good person when you're in a foreign country. Be a good guest. Okay, and I I don't do drugs, so I don't recommend anyone else do that anyways. But if you are doing drugs, I recommend, like I said before, I recommend you stop before you come to China. Um, and oh, another thing my friend pointed out about that other video is um, part of, that big party I referenced, I spoke about, where they grabbed all these foreigners, and they started, at this big overnight rave party. Apparently the impetus for that was, according to him, and I think he's probably right. um, there was sort of a big movement where they wanted to show something or prove something, and sort of, there was a political movement. There was a village in Guangdong province that had been actually manufacturing drugs, including ketamine. I think I should do a Google search. Isn't ketamine that stuff where isn't that like ecstasy? I think so. I don't fucking know. I've never done it. I don't know about that. But apparently that it is. And that's what they do at those raves. I don't know. But at any rate, apparently, there was a big brouhaha about that, and the Chinese government felt that they needed to crack down on it. So I don't know. It wasn't necessarily a crackdown on foreigners. It wasn't going against foreigners. There was a huge group of Chinese and foreigners caught up in this dragnet, and they needed to make a big show. But apparently, there were some foreigners who actually ended up, they had done smoked a little marijuana, whatever. I don't recommend that again, but and some of them, they didn't really. They were conciliatory. They were like, hey, just this is what happened, and they actually, some of them didn't get deported, even regardless of work situation. They got, just like a slap on the wrist. They were kind of kept in jail. They were fined, for 5 days. Some of them it was 8 days, and then the majority of those people that I'm referring to right now, there was a group of them that they actually didn't end up having. Many of them were able to renew their visas and to continue on in China. Oh, okay. Um, what was it? There was something else here. Um, uh, so, at any rate, you just want to bear in mind um, well, I guess that's it for this video.